My brother used my name to rent luxury apartment and left me to face $485,000 in debt. When I first got the letter from the bank, I thought it was some kind of joke or a mistake or maybe some scam, like one of those spam emails promising lottery winnings if you just give her bank details. But no, it was real. The letter said I owed $485,000 on a lease for a luxury apartment downtown, a lease I had never signed, never even seen before. At first, I couldn't believe it. I stared at the paper for what felt like hours, the numbers swimming before my eyes. It said I was responsible for rent, utilities, maintenance fees, all accumulated over the last 3 years. 3 years? How is this possible? I've been living in the same tiny studio on the outskirts of the city, scraping by with my modest job and working 2 shifts to make ends meet. The thought of a luxury apartment anywhere near downtown was laughable. The letter gave me a name of a representative to call if I wanted to resolve the matter. So, the next day, shaking with anxiety, I dialed the number. "Hello, this is Helen from Riverside Leasing," a calm, professional voice answered. "How can I assist you?" I explained the situation, careful not to sound frantic. "I receive a notice that I owe nearly $500,000 for a lease I never signed." There was a brief pause. Then Helen said, "Let me pull up your account." I heard the clicking of keys. Then she said, "The lease was signed in your name on March 2nd, 2022, for apartment 14B at the Grand Marlowe." "That's not my signature," I said flatly. "I understand, but the paperwork is signed and the payments were due monthly. It appears there have been several missed payments in the past." My heart sank. I couldn't imagine how this nightmare was unfolding. Over the next few days, I dug into the mystery, determined to find out what had happened. I couldn't just pay this huge sum for something I had no part in. I talked to the leasing office in person. They showed me the lease agreement. The signature was undeniably mine, or at least a very convincing forgery. The address on the ID attached matched mine, my social security number, my date of birth. It was as if someone had stolen my identity. I filed a police report for identity theft. But that was just the beginning. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. It said only, "Stop digging or you'll regret it." Fear gripped me, but I pushed on. That's when I found out the unimaginable truth. The tenant living in apartment 14B, the luxury place I supposedly rented, was none other than my own brother, Michael. Michael, the brother I'd always looked up to, who was supposed to be my closest family. Except I hadn't seen or heard from him in nearly 5 years. Michael had left the family home after a bitter fight with our parents and me, the middle child caught in the crossfire. He had been a charming, gifted kid with dreams of making it big, but along the way, he'd gotten tangled with the wrong crowd, the wrong choices. I hadn't spoken to him since the day he slammed the door behind him, leaving nothing but silence. Now, he was living the high life in an apartment I never signed for, using my identity as a mask. I tried to call him, but his number was disconnected. I tried to ask my parents, but they said, "We don't know where he is." But I knew better. This was personal. This was betrayal. I could feel the anger bubbling under my skin. Someone was ruining my life, using me like a pawn in a game I didn't even know was being played. And the worst part? The bank was threatening to sue me. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, the city lights flickering outside my window like mocking eyes. I replayed the memories of Michael, my brother who once shared everything with me. Laughter, secrets, dreams. How could he do this? How could he hide behind my name and leave me to pick up the pieces? I knew I had to confront him. I had to expose the truth. But first, I had to survive the storm that was coming, because this was no ordinary identity theft. This was war. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach tighter than ever. The clock was ticking. The bank had given me a deadline, 2 weeks to settle the debt or face a lawsuit that could ruin my credit, my future, even my sanity. I began by reaching out to my parents again, hoping for answers, a clue, anything. "Mom, Dad," I said during a tense dinner, "do you know where Michael is? Or anything about this apartment?" They exchanged uneasy glances. My mother's eyes shimmered with tears, and my father's jaw tightened. "We don't know," Mom whispered. "He's disappeared. No calls, no visits. Nothing. But he's using my name, I said, voice cracking. He's living in that apartment, ruining my credit. Why won't you help me find him? My father slammed his fist on the table. Don't drag us into your problems. That night, the chasm between us grew wider. I realized my family was fractured beyond repair. I was alone. The next step was to get into the apartment. If Michael was living there, maybe I could find some evidence, some clue that could help me take back my life. I called the leasing office again. I need access to apartment 14B, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Helen hesitated. That's not usually allowed. It's urgent. I'm a victim of identity theft. I need to see if my personal documents or information are there. After some back and forth, she reluctantly agreed to arrange a visit, but warned it had to be supervised. A few days later, I found myself standing in front of the glass doors of the Grand Marlowe. The building was everything I was not. Luxury, sleek marble floors, art installations, security guards nodding at me with polite indifference. Helen met me in the lobby. This way, she said, her tone clipped but professional. The elevator hummed as we rode up to the 14th floor. The hallway was quiet, the scent of fresh paint lingering. Helen pulled out a master key and unlocked the door. I stepped inside. The apartment was a contrast to the cold exterior of the building. Warm light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden hues across expensive furniture. On the wall hung abstract paintings I would never have chosen. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel appliances. But what caught my eye was the chaos in the corner. A cluttered desk, scattered papers, half-empty bottles. I moved toward the desk, heart pounding. There it was. My driver's license, my social security card, unopened mail addressed to me. Someone had been living here as me. Suddenly, a noise behind me made me spin around. Michael. He stood in the doorway, eyes dark and guarded. Why are you here? He said, voice low. I'm here because you stole my identity, I said, trying to stay calm. You owe me an explanation. He laughed bitterly. You think I planned this? I didn't want this life, but I had no choice. I wanted to ask what he meant, but he stepped forward. Listen, this isn't the life I dreamed of, but it's the only way I could survive. I swallowed hard. Then why hide behind my name? Why leave me to face the consequences? His eyes flickered with pain. Because I'm desperate, and because you always had everything handed to you. I froze. Handed to me? I whispered. Yes, he spat. You're the perfect kid, the golden child, Mom and Dad's favorite. You got the scholarships, the jobs, the respect. I felt a stab of guilt and anger. You think I chose any of it? I worked my ass off every day. His face twisted. You don't know me. We stood there, the silence heavy between us. The truth was messy, tangled. Michael wasn't just some thief. He was a brother broken by bitterness, desperation, and choices that spiraled out of control. I looked around the apartment again. This isn't you, Michael, I said quietly. This isn't who you want to be. He shook his head. Maybe I don't know who I am anymore. That night, I left the apartment with more questions than answers. The fight wasn't just about identity theft anymore. It was about family, betrayal, and the pain that no one ever talks about. After that tense encounter, I felt torn apart inside. I had found Michael, but instead of closure, it had opened a floodgate of raw emotions. Anger, guilt, confusion. I needed to understand how we had ended up here, two siblings trapped in a broken cycle. Back home, I searched through old photo albums and letters my mother had kept hidden away. Faces smiled back at me. Us as kids, carefree and hopeful. There was a time when Michael was the star of the family, the kid everyone believed in. I called my childhood friend, Lisa, who had stayed close with Michael long after he left home. Lisa, I said, tell me everything you know about him after he left. There was a pause. He changed, she said finally. It started small, missing school, skipping calls. Then drugs, bad company. It was like he fell into a black hole. I clenched the phone tighter. Did he ever say why? Not really. He was ashamed. You know how he always wanted to be the perfect son, but he was struggling. I felt a pang of sorrow. Maybe Michael was drowning in a sea of expectations and failures. The next day, I contacted a lawyer specializing in identity theft and family disputes. She was direct. Your brother used your identity to lease that apartment, and probably to apply for credit and services. The bank can come after you for the debt unless you prove the fraud. How do I do that? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. Surveillance footage, witnesses, proof he lived there, not you. But the strongest evidence would be him admitting it or a legal document proving he acted without your permission. I knew confronting Michael again was inevitable, but I didn't know if he'd cooperate. Days passed. Calls and messages to Michael went unanswered. I decided to try a different approach. I left a note at his apartment door. We need to talk, for both our sakes. That evening, I waited outside, heart pounding. After an hour, the door opened slightly. Michael peeked out, wary. I don't want trouble, he said. Neither do I replied gently. But I want to help. We can fix this together. He looked at me, eyes searching, conflicted. Finally, he nodded and stepped outside. We walked to a nearby cafe, the silence between us thick. Over coffee, Michael started to open up. I didn't plan to use your name, he said quietly. I was desperate. No job, no home. Someone told me it would be easy. Who? I pressed. He hesitated. A guy from the street. Said he could help me get a fresh start if I used someone else's identity. I shook my head in disbelief. And you didn't think about the consequences? For me. Michael looked down. I was scared. I didn't want to hurt you. But I was drowning. I swallowed my anger. We both made mistakes. But now, you have to face what you've done. He nodded. I'm ready, but I don't know how to fix it. That night, I drafted a plan. We would go to the bank together. Michael would admit the fraud. We'd work with the authorities to clear my name. It felt like a fragile bridge forming between us. But old wounds run deep. Then the call came. Helen from leasing. There's a complaint from your brother, she said. He claims you're trying to sabotage him, making false accusations. My heart dropped. Michael had already started spinning a story to protect himself. I realized this fight wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about survival. The days following Helen's call were a whirlwind of doubt and paranoia. Michael had always been clever, but I hadn't expected him to start twisting the truth so quickly. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare where the lines between victim and villain blurred. I spent hours on the phone with the bank, trying to explain the situation, sending copies of the police report, pleading with them to hold off on any legal action. But the pressure was mounting. Every day, I worried the lawsuit papers would arrive, the calls would come demanding payment I didn't have. And Michael? He went silent again. No messages. No answers. I started to question everything about our relationship. Was this the brother I had known? Or had the years of pain changed him into someone I didn't recognize? One evening, a knock on my door jolted me from a restless sleep. I opened it to find a tall man in a dark coat, his expression grim. Detective Collins, he said, flashing his badge. May I come in? I nodded, heart pounding. He stepped inside and sat down, folding his hands. We've been investigating identity theft and fraud connected to the Grand Marlowe apartments, he began. I swallowed hard. Your brother, Michael, is under suspicion. Several victims have come forward. I frowned. Victims? I thought it was just me. The detective shook his head. No, we believe he's been running a scheme, using stolen identities to lease apartments, rack up debts, then disappear. You're lucky you caught this early. My mind raced. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined. But I want to help, I said, voice firm. I want to clear my name and bring him to justice. The detective nodded. That's why I'm here. We need your cooperation. And your brother's. I knew what that meant. A legal battle, a family torn apart in the open. The next day, I called Michael again. This time, he answered. I don't want to drag you into this, he said softly. I'm already in it, I said. There was silence. Meet me at the park near the river, he finally said. I agreed, though my heart was heavy. When I arrived, he was sitting on a bench, looking older, worn down. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For everything. I sat beside him. I want to believe you, Michael. But you have to come clean. He nodded. I will. But I'm scared. If I go down for this, I lose everything. Then we fight it together. He looked at me, eyes glistening. Promise me you won't hate me. I don't, I said. But I'm angry. And hurt. He smiled sadly. Me too. That moment felt like a fragile truce. But as the days went on, The cracks began to show. Michael missed meetings with the police. He avoided calls from lawyers. And worse, rumors started spreading. Stories about him disappearing again, debts unpaid, enemies made. I felt myself sinking under the weight of his mistakes. One night, I received a call from an unknown number. "Stop looking for him," a voice hissed, "or you'll regret it." I hung up, my hands trembling. The stakes had risen beyond family drama. This was now dangerous. Fear settled over me like a thick fog. The warning call wasn't just empty threats. It felt real, like a shadow lurking just beyond the edge of my life. I thought about going to the police again, but Michael warned me to be careful. "I can't protect you if you go too far," he said one evening over a shaky phone call. "I'm not backing down," I said firmly. But the more I pushed, the more I realized how little I really knew about the world Michael had gotten tangled in. The street names, the shady characters, the debts that weren't just financial but dangerous. I was in over my head. Desperate, I reached out to Lisa again. "I need help," I said. "I don't know who else to trust." She listened quietly, then said, "There's someone who might know, someone Michael trusted." She gave me a name, Darren. "Be careful," she warned. "He's not exactly on the right side of the law." Still, I had no choice. I met Darren at a grimy bar on the edge of town. He was younger than I expected, but his eyes were hard and calculating. "So you're Michael's sister," he said, taking a slow sip from his glass. "You want to know what got him into this mess?" I nodded. He leaned in. "Michael owes some bad people a lot of money. They're after him. Using your identity was a way to stay one step ahead. But the debts don't go away." I swallowed hard. "Is there a way out?" Darren shrugged. "Not without paying up." That night, I sat alone, the weight of it all pressing down. I thought about Michael's charm, his broken promises, the man I barely recognized. Was family enough to forgive? Enough to save him? Or was this a sinking ship I needed to abandon? The next morning, a message popped up on my phone. "Meet me tonight. I have answers." It was from Michael. I didn't hesitate. We met in an empty parking lot beneath a flickering street lamp. He looked tired, worn, but determined. "I've been running," he said, "hiding from the people who want to collect." I looked at him, searching for the brother I once knew. "There's a deal," he said. "One last job, then I'm out. But I need you." I shook my head. "No, I'm done cleaning up your mess." He grabbed my arm. "Please, this is the only way." The desperation in his eyes broke something inside me. I agreed to listen. Michael laid out the plan. A risky job involving a high-stakes deal with one of the people he owed money to. If it succeeded, it would clear his debts and give us both freedom. If it failed, well, I didn't want to think about it. Still, I knew the truth. I was trapped in this story, whether I wanted to be or not. And sometimes, love means stepping into the fire. The following days were a blur of tension and planning. Michael and I moved cautiously, aware that one wrong step could mean disaster. Not just for him, but for both of us. He introduced me to his contact, a man named Marco, who operated in shadows and whispers. Marco was cool, calculating, and not someone to be crossed. We met in a dim warehouse by the docks, the salty air thick with anticipation. Marco laid out the details of the job. A transfer of sensitive information hidden inside shipment. If we succeeded, Michael's debt would be wiped clean. But the risk was enormous. The wrong move would mean police involvement or worse, violent retribution from those who had already made their threats clear. As the day of the job approached, I felt my stomach twist into knots. Michael was nervous but resolute. "I'm not the same person you remember," he said quietly as we prepared. "But this is my chance." I wanted to believe him, but a shadow of doubt lingered. We drove together to the docks under the cover of night. The cities glowed dim behind us. The plan was simple. Intercept the shipment, confirm the contents, and hand it over to Marco's men. Michael moved with surprising confidence, scanning the area with sharp eyes. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the shadows. Gunshots shattered the silence. We dove for cover. Chaos erupted. In the confusion, Michael was hit. Blood stained his shirt. I scrambled to pull him to safety, heart pounding. "We need to get out of here," I shouted. He nodded weakly. We raced to the car, speeding away from the danger. At the hospital, The sterile smell and harsh lights made the reality sink in. Michael was unconscious. I sat by his side, tears falling silently. All our past wounds, mistakes, and betrayals seemed to fade into the background. He was vulnerable, and for the first time in years, I felt a fierce determination to protect him. As I waited for news, my phone buzzed. A message from the bank. Legal action postponed pending investigation. For the first time, a glimmer of hope. But just as relief started to wash over me, a knock came at the hospital room door. Detective Collins stepped in. "We need to talk," he said gravely. I braced myself. The storm wasn't over. Detective Collins' expression was grave as he closed the hospital room door behind him. "Ms. Harper," he began, using my last name, "there's new evidence regarding your brother's activities." I nodded, bracing myself. "We've discovered that Michael wasn't acting alone," Collins continued. "There's an entire network involved in identity theft, fraud, and illegal leases. And the person pulling the strings might be closer than you think." My breath caught. "Closer? What do you mean?" He leaned forward. "We suspect someone within your family may have facilitated Michael's access to your identity." My mind raced back to my parents' evasiveness, the cold shoulders, the strange silences. Could they have betrayed me too? The detective laid out his plan, a careful investigation involving interviews, surveillance, and digital forensics. I agreed to cooperate fully, knowing this was my only chance to clear my name and find out the truth. Over the next week, Collins conducted interviews with our parents, neighbors, and even Michael's old friends. The tension at home became unbearable. Every glance from my mother felt like a dagger. My father avoided eye contact altogether. One evening, unable to hold back, I confronted them. "Did you know about Michael's identity theft? Did you help him?" My mother's face crumpled. "It's complicated," she whispered. "We wanted to help him get back on his feet. We thought it was temporary." "Using my name?" I snapped. "Do you have any idea what this has done to me?" My father finally spoke, his voice low and tired. "We were scared. He was spiraling, and we didn't know how to stop it. The family fractures ran deeper than I imagined. But I couldn't let the past consume me. I had to focus on the present and on justice." The investigation uncovered digital trails linking my parents' computers to the forged lease applications. Evidence was mounting. I felt a mixture of betrayal and sorrow. Could I forgive them? Would I want to? Meanwhile, Michael remained in the hospital. His condition was stable but fragile. I visited every day, sitting silently beside him, replaying the past and wondering about the future. One afternoon, his eyes fluttered open. "Hey," he whispered. I reached for his hand. "We're going to fix this," I said. He nodded weakly. "I'm sorry." In the courtroom, the trial began. The story of identity theft, family secrets, and desperation unfolded like a tragic drama. Michael testified, admitting his mistakes and pleading for mercy. Our parents also faced charges for their role in the fraud. The judge listened intently. In the end, the sentence was heavy but fair, a mix of probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. As the gavel fell, I realized that justice was only the first step. Healing would take much longer. But for the first time, I felt a cautious hope. Maybe broken families could mend. Maybe I could reclaim my life. The courtroom emptied slowly, murmurs and flashbulbs filling the air as people absorbed the verdict. I stayed seated, my hands trembling. It was over. Or at least, this chapter was. Outside, the press swarmed, cameras flashing. Michael and I avoided the crowd, stepping into a quiet side street. He looked at me, eyes softer than I'd seen in years. "Thank you," he said simply. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Back at home, silence lingered like a ghost. My parents retreated into themselves, burdened by guilt and shame. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. This wasn't the family I remembered, but I still had to rebuild my life. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of phone calls, credit agencies, and painstaking paperwork to clear my name. Every call to the bank, every visit to a credit bureau, felt like peeling back layers of damage left behind by Michael's actions. I leaned heavily on Lisa's support, grateful for a friend who believed in me. One evening, as I sat alone in my small apartment, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Michael. "Can we start over?" My heart ached. Could I forgive? Could I trust? I thought about the man who risked everything to protect me, who fought his demons and paid a high price. I typed back, "We'll try." Life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Michael began attending counseling sessions and job training. I found a better job, something steady, a fresh start. We met for coffee often, rebuilding a fragile bond. But healing wasn't linear. One day, I received a letter. Inside was a photo, Michael standing with a group of unfamiliar men, some with cold, hard eyes. Attached was a note. "You can't escape your past." Fear flared again. Was Michael truly free, or was the darkness still closing in? Determined to protect both of us, I reached out to Detective Collins. He promised to keep watch, to help us stay safe. Together, we created a plan, ways to spot danger, steps to take if threatened. Yet, despite the vigilance, the threat felt like a constant shadow. I realized the road ahead would be long and uncertain. But for the first time, I wasn't walking alone. Months passed. The fragile peace we'd carved out began to settle, but the past refused to stay buried. One rainy afternoon, as I walked home from work, I noticed a black SUV idling near my building. The windows were tinted, but I felt the weight of those unseen eyes. I quickened my pace. Inside my apartment, I double-checked locks, windows, and security cameras. My heart raced, and a familiar knot of fear settled in my stomach. The threats were no longer just shadows. They were real. That night, Michael called, his voice tense. "I think they're watching me again," he said. "I don't want to drag you into this." I swallowed hard. We're in this together. We agreed to meet at a safe house Detective Collins arranged, somewhere off the grid, away from prying eyes. At the safe house, an old cabin surrounded by thick woods, we laid low. The days blended into nights as we planned our next moves. Detective Collins brought updates on the case. The identity theft ring was larger and more dangerous than we thought. "Michael's debts are tied to a man named Vance," Collins said. "A ruthless figure with a long reach." I felt a cold shiver. One evening, Michael and I sat by the fireplace. "I want to fix this," he said. "Not just for me, but for us." I nodded. "We have to." We began gathering evidence to help the police build a case against Vance and his network. Michael shared everything he knew: names, locations, transactions. It was dangerous information. Then, a knock at the cabin door shattered the fragile calm. We froze. Collins signaled to wait. He opened the door slowly. A courier handed him an envelope, then disappeared into the night. Inside was a single photo, Michael bound and bruised, and a message: "Stop or lose everything." Panic surged through us. Vance was sending a message. He was watching, waiting. We were running out of time. Determined not to be intimidated, we redoubled our efforts. Michael agreed to testify, to stand up to the man who had destroyed his life. But the risks were higher than ever. One night, as I lay awake, I realized something profound. This fight wasn't just about debts or stolen identities. It was about reclaiming our lives, our dignity, and breaking free from the chains of the past. And no matter what happened, I was ready to face the storm. The days that followed were a blur of late-night strategy sessions, clandestine meetings, and whispered plans. Detective Collins coordinated with federal agents, preparing for the takedown of Vance's operation. Michael and I felt the tension tighten like a noose around our necks. We knew the moment of reckoning was near. One evening, Collins called. "The raid is scheduled for tomorrow night," he said. "We need Michael to be ready to testify." Michael swallowed hard. "This is it," he whispered. I reached out and squeezed his hand. "You're not alone." The night of the raid was a storm of flashing lights, sirens, and shouting. Federal agents stormed the sprawling compound where Vance and his associates operated. Gunfire echoed in the distance. Michael sat with me in a safe room, trembling. "This is for the future," I told him. The next day, Michael gave his testimony. He detailed the identity theft scheme, the debts, the threats. His courage surprised me. The courtroom was packed, tension thick. Vance's men sat stoically, faces unreadable. Days later, Vance was arrested, his empire crumbling. The news spread quickly. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lift. But healing was just beginning. Michael and I faced the challenge of rebuilding trust, of reclaiming our lives from the wreckage. Our parents sought forgiveness, and though I wasn't ready to forget, I was open to healing. I rebuilt my credit, repaired my reputation, and found a job that gave me pride. Michael found steady work and therapy, slowly transforming. Together, we faced the future cautiously hopeful. Yet deep inside, I knew scars remain. The past shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. One quiet evening, as the sun set, Michael and I sat on a park bench. "Thank you," he said simply. I smiled. We survived, and that was enough for now. Even as things began to settle, life had its own way of testing us. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at my workplace. It was Sarah, Michael's ex-girlfriend. She looked anxious, eyes darting around the room. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly. Over coffee, Sarah revealed new information. Michael's debts weren't just from Vance, she explained. There's another group, even more dangerous. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside were photos and documents, evidence of a deeper criminal underworld, one Michael had unknowingly stepped into. My heart pounded. Was the nightmare really over, or had it just begun? I shared the information with Detective Collins, who frowned deeply. "We need to tread carefully," he warned. That night, Michael and I talked long into the early hours. He confessed how, desperate and scared, he'd unwittingly become involved with these shadowy figures. "I never wanted this life," he said. "But sometimes survival means making terrible choices." I realized our fight wasn't just against external enemies. It was against the darkness inside us, the mistakes, regrets, and fears. We promised each other honesty and support. In the coming weeks, we worked with Collins to unravel the new threat. It was dangerous and complicated. Sometimes, the past refuses to let go, but I was determined, no matter the cost. Our story wasn't finished. The deeper we dug, the more tangled the web became. Michael's past was like quicksand. Each step seemed to pull us further down. We uncovered links to money laundering, black market dealings, and corrupt officials. The complexity was overwhelming. One night, as I was leaving work, I noticed a figure following me. Heart pounding, I quickened my pace. Suddenly, the figure grabbed my arm. It was Darren, the man Lisa had warned me about months ago. "Leave this alone," he hissed. "You don't know what you're dealing with." I pulled free and ran. That moment crystallized the danger we faced. No longer just financial ruin, but threats to our very lives. I told Michael and Collins immediately. Collins arranged for increased security. Still, the fear lingered. Michael, shaken, confessed he had hidden information from me. "I thought I was protecting you," he said. "I need the truth," I insisted. Over the following days, Michael revealed the full scope of his involvement. He'd been a small player in a vast criminal network, but his testimony had put many powerful people at risk. Our enemies were numerous and ruthless. Yet, despite it all, we pressed on. Our shared goal, to end this nightmare. At times, the weight was almost unbearable, but I clung to hope. The tension was unbearable as we planned the next moves carefully. Collins coordinated a sting operation targeting key figures in the network. Michael agreed to help, but the risk was staggering. We were playing a dangerous game. One evening, as I waited nervously in a safe house, Collins arrived with urgent news. "The operation's compromised," he said grimly. "We need to move immediately." We scrambled, packing essentials. Suddenly, the safe house was surrounded by armed men. Gunfire erupted. Michael and I barely escaped through a back exit. Our hearts pounded as we fled into the night. For days, we were on the run, constantly looking over our shoulders. I saw a side of Michael I'd never known. Fear, desperation, but also fierce determination. Despite the chaos, our bond strengthened. We weren't just siblings anymore. We were survivors. Eventually, Collins arranged for witness protection. We entered a new world, one of secrecy and caution. As we settled into our new lives, I thought about the journey, how far we come, and the battles yet to fight. Life in witness protection was a strange, lonely existence. We had new names, new identities, and a constant watchful eye. Freedom came at a cost. Michael and I lived cautiously, each day a balancing act between safety and fear. Sometimes I missed the chaos of our old lives, the rawness, the passion. But I knew this was necessary. Slowly, Michael rebuilt himself. Therapy, steady work, and distance from the past helped. I too found new purpose, helping others caught in similar webs of deceit. One afternoon, Colin stopped by with surprising news. Vance and his associates have been convicted, he said. The network is dismantled. Relief washed over me. Justice had finally been served. Yet, healing was ongoing. Forgiveness was hard, but possible. Michael and I promised to never let the past define us. To rebuild our family on honesty and trust. As we looked toward the future, I realized something profound. Even broken families can find their way home. Years later, as I stood on the balcony of my modest new apartment, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The woman I was then, the one buried beneath the weight of stolen identity, shattered family, and fear, felt like a distant memory. Michael had changed too. The darkness that once consumed him had been replaced by quiet strength. We rebuilt our lives slowly, brick by brick. Not without scars, not without setbacks, but with a shared commitment to honesty and healing. We had learned that family was more than blood. It was trust, forgiveness, and second chances. One day, we gathered with our parents for a tentative family dinner. The atmosphere was awkward, but sincere. We spoke openly, no more secrets. I realized the past, no matter how painful, had shaped us, but it didn't have to imprison us. As the evening wound down, Michael raised a glass. To new beginnings, he said. We clinked glasses, a quiet victory over years of pain and betrayal. That night, as I lay in bed, I understood something vital. Life isn't about never falling. It's about rising every time we do. And sometimes, the most broken stories can become the strongest. The apartment I never rented, the debts I never owed, it all became part of a larger story. One of survival, of family fractured and mended, of revenge replaced by redemption. And in the end, I wasn't just reclaiming my name. I was reclaiming myself.